We are finally past the halfway point in the book of Ecclesiastes. We're in chapter 7 for this next session. It's called Like It or Not, and Solomon addresses wisdom again through a series of contrasts, or a series of couplets that shows us that, like it or not, God knows best, and life is better when we trust Him. Life is better when we trust His control, we trust His wisdom. A lot of you guys probably like popcorn, but you probably don't like the popcorn kernel by itself. You don't just pop the popcorn kernel into your mouth and chew it like that. You stick it into a microwave or on a kettle on your stove, and you put it through the fire. And that makes it so much better. It makes it so much more enjoyable. Although I personally don't even like popcorn, so that's a whole different deal. But sometimes we learn best through the fire. Sometimes we learn best through the hardship and the pain. Sometimes we have to go through difficulties and find our faith forged in the fire to get to where God wants us to be, to become who God wants us to become. And Solomon addresses that here in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, which I thought I had marked. There we go. A good name is better than fine perfume, and the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting, since that is the end of all mankind, and the living should take it to heart. Grief is better than laughter, or for when a face is sad, a heart may be glad. The heart of the wise is in a house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in a house of pleasure. It is better to listen to rebuke from a wise person than to listen to the song of fools. For it is like the crackling of burning thorns under the pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This too is futile. Surely the practice of extortion turns a wise person into a fool, and a bribe corrupts the mind. The end of a matter is better than its beginning. A patient spirit is better than a proud spirit. Don't let your spirit rush to be angry, for anger abides in the heart of fools. Don't say, why were the former days better than these? Since it is not wise of you to ask this. Wisdom is as good an inheritance as an inheritance, and an advantage to those who see under the sun. Or who see the sun. Because wisdom is protection as silver is protection, but the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of its owner. Consider the work of God, for who can straighten out what He has made crooked? In the day of prosperity be joyful. In the day of adversity consider God has made the one as well as the other, so that no one can discover anything that will come after him. In my futile life, I have seen everything. Someone righteous perishes in spite of his righteousness, and someone wicked lives long in spite of his evil. Don't be excessively righteous, and don't be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Don't be excessively wicked, and don't be foolish. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you grasp the one and do not let the other slip from your hand. For the one who fears God will end up with both. Wisdom makes the wise person stronger than 10 rulers of a city. There is certainly no one righteous on earth who does good and never sins. Don't pay attention to everything people say, or you may hear your servant cursing you. For in your heart you know that many times you yourself have cursed others. I have tested all this by wisdom. I resolved I will be wise, but it was beyond me. What exists is beyond reach and very deep. Who can discover it? I turned my thoughts to know, to explore, and to examine wisdom and an explanation for things, and to know that wickedness is stupidity and folly is madness. And I find more bitter than death the woman who is a trap, her heart a net, and her hands chains. The one who pleases God will escape her, but the sinner will be captured by her. Look, says the teacher, I have discovered this by adding one thing to another to find the explanation, which my soul continually searches for but does not find. I found one person in 1,000, but none of these was a woman. Only see this, I have discovered that God made people upright, but they pursued many schemes. Wisdom makes life better, even when life is hard. Excuse me. Better is a key word in this passage. It's used at least 11 times. But it's not necessarily the better that we think it is, the betters that we would think of. Wisdom allows life to be better even when it's hard. So let's talk about this like it or not idea. Like it or not, there's often joy found in sorrow. The first few verses deal with this. Wisdom comes often from the fires of mourning, from trouble, from sorrow, from despair, from disappointment. God is more concerned with our maturity than with our temporary happiness, than with our momentary happiness. He is not a moody, or Solomon is not a moody, grouchy man saying this. He says sorrow can do the heart better than laughter. He has just about everything you could imagine, and yet he's saying this. Sorrow can also be a nourishing thing just as much as laughter, and it strengthens the inner person like food. It takes both sorrow and laughter for a balanced life. A lot of this section had to do with the name that we make and the name that we leave as our legacy, with what we do in the dash, with what matters being the life that we live between our birth date and our death date, and the name that we leave from that. He's also talking about facing death, looking death in the face and learning from it, not avoiding it, not being afraid. With a good reputation, the day of our death is better than our birth because we leave that behind us. Second thing, like it or not, there's pleasure even in painful accountability. We don't like to be called out. We don't like rebuke. We don't like other people calling us out, telling us we should do this, shouldn't do that. Solomon compared the praise of fools to the burning thorns of a campfire. You hear a lot of noise, but it doesn't do much lasting good. The rebuke of those we trust is better than the flattery of fools. Nobody likes criticism, but without accountability, we go after individualism. It's rampant, and we wind up having that take over. We need other people along for the ride. We've talked about that many times through this series from Ecclesiastes, because Solomon talks about it many times. We need people willing to pick us up and willing to knock us over, willing to knock us down a few notches if we need it, willing to share advice as well as correction and rebuke. We need to be humble to that. We need to be open to that. We need to value what they say. God gives advice often through other people, and he combats pride and enhances humility through what other people say. So like it or not, there's pleasure even in painful accountability. Third thing, like it or not, the hard way is often better for us than the easy way. We're always looking for shortcuts, right? But the long haul is better than a shortcut, and we need to be aware of easy routes. They can lead us down costly detours that cause danger, cause long-term pain, cause long-term difficulty. Coaches tell us this in sports. Teachers tell us this in school. Parents tell us this in life, and so does God. So we have to ask ourselves, am I about convenience, laziness, or commitment? The long, hard way is tough, but it's always worth it. Sometimes the better way is patiently playing the waiting game and waiting for God's will to play out. If God is at the beginning of what we do, he'll see it through to the end. He'll be in it from beginning to end. Many times things in the Bible start rough but end well. So we need to not just always take the easy way. Like it or not, there comes a time to move forward and move on. He talks about not longing for the good old days. And we all do that at times, thinking things were better at that point, better then is what I'm trying to say. Someone once said, the good old days are a combination of a bad memory and a good imagination. Yesterday is past. It can't be changed. We can't do anything with it. We can't bring it back. Tomorrow may never come, but we can make the most of today because it's what we have. We can seize the day and build for a better today and a better future, a better tomorrow. Learn from the past, prepare for the future, but live in the present. Live today. When we stay stuck in the past, we're paralyzed. We're trapped. We're stuck. We can't move on, and the present suffers and the future suffers. When we talk about the past, we're speaking from emotions. We're forgetting other things. There's this fear. There's this sense of loss. There's this insecurity about the future. We can bring heaven to earth through living in the here and now. So like it or not, there comes a time to move forward and move on. So those are the like it or nots of the first few verses of this passage. I want to switch gears with a couple of other thoughts. Wisdom helps us see life clearly. It may not solve everything. It may not smooth all the bumps, but it gives us perspective. And we can see things in their true size. We can see things in their real significance. We can see a long view of things. We can accept and deal with the ever-evolving experiences that life brings us. Wisdom is better than wealth and money, because money can bring us a little bit of satisfaction, but it can lose value. It can be stolen. It can go away. But true wisdom maintains its course, and it maintains its value, and it never can be lost. Wisdom allows us to see God's hand. It allows us to see his will. We know that he's in control. We know that he makes all things beautiful in his time, but it may not be in our time. And it also helps us to not be discouraged when life stinks, and to not be too cocky when life is really good. We learn to accept adversity and prosperity alike. Life doesn't always seem fair. It's not always going to go the way that we want, and sometimes the wicked prosper and the good suffer. With a longer-term perspective, we can see God in it all. And we can see that his wisdom will hold, and it'll be consistent, and it'll be unchanging, and it'll always be there. The final thing, or the final few verses, wisdom helps us face life stronger. It helps us deal with problems. It helps us deal with people. It helps us deal with the perplexities of life. It helps us deal with the pitfalls of life. When we walk with God, we see that we shouldn't fear those around us. We shouldn't fear what's going on around us. We have what we need. We have what's necessary to face the challenges that are set before us. We can face tomorrow. We can face and overcome whatever life brings us. We can face and overcome sin. We can learn to detect and defeat Satan through God's wisdom. We can face and be unaffected by what people say about us. We can be okay knowing that we won't always understand the reason for everything that happens. We can deal with humanity's sinfulness. We can deal with the snares and temptations in the world. We can overcome, and we can become stronger through wisdom, through his power and his strength. So ultimately in chapter 7, he's saying wisdom makes life better, clearer, and stronger. It's not always the way that we understand it, not always the way that we want it to be, but we can choose wisely. We can live for God. We can live for others. Our highest purpose is not happiness. Your life is not meant to be patted on the back, yay me, happy, cozy, comfortable life. God is preparing us. He grants us wisdom. He gives us knowledge, and we become more aware of him through whatever we go through and through it all. And he becomes bigger as we realize that he's there walking through it all with us all the way. Trusting God's wisdom, trusting God's power, trusting God's strength. Thank you, guys.